What I'm going to tell you today isn't just a story. It's something that will move you from within. But before I continue, I need to tell you something very serious. If you don't subscribe now, you simply won't see the end of this story. And worse, you also won't be able to follow the next impactful stories we're preparing. So click subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and comment below which city you're watching from. We love getting to know each person in this community that just keeps growing. The autumn rain hammered against the windows of the grand mansion on Beacon Hill in Boston, each drop echoing like memories Sophia had tried so desperately to forget. 20 years had passed since that horrific night when she was thrown onto these very streets, 7 months pregnant, and with nothing but the clothes on her back. Now, as she stood in her own palatial home overlooking the Charles River, she never imagined that fate would bring him crawling back to her doorstep. Don't miss a thing. Subscribe now and discover the ending of this and other thrilling and dramatic stories. What you're about to witness is a tale of betrayal, revenge, and ultimate justice that will leave you breathless. The story of how a young woman's darkest moment became the foundation for her greatest triumph, and how the very man who destroyed her life would one day beg for her mercy. This is not just another story of hardship. This is a masterpiece of human resilience that will change how you view forgiveness forever. Part 1. The Fall. The memory came flooding back with crystalline clarity. It was December 15th, 2004, and snow was falling heavily on Marlborough Street in Boston's Back Bay. Sophia Charlotte Whitmore, then just 22 years old and 7 months pregnant, had been living in the Ashworth family mansion for 3 years since marrying their eldest son, Alexander. The Ashworth family had built their fortune through generations of banking and real estate investments. Their patriarch, Maximilian Ashworth, was a man whose word could move markets and whose disapproval could destroy lives. At 75, he ruled his empire and his family with an iron fist, viewing Sophia as nothing more than a gold digger who had seduced his son. That fateful evening, Sophia had been resting in the master bedroom when she heard Alexander's voice rising from the study below. The conversation that would shatter her world was about to begin. "Father, you can't be serious about this." Alexander's voice carried through the mahogany-paneled walls. "Sophia is carrying your grandchild." Maximilian's response was ice-cold. "That girl is nothing but a leech, Alexander. She saw our wealth and latched onto you like a parasite. I've been watching her for 3 years, and I know exactly what she is." Sophia's blood ran cold as she pressed her ear to the door, her swollen belly making the movement awkward and painful. The baby inside her seemed to sense her distress, kicking frantically against her ribs. "She loves me, Father, and I love her," Alexander replied, but his voice lacked conviction. "Love?" Maximilian's bitter laugh echoed through the house. "Love doesn't pay for the designer clothes she wears, the jewelry she flaunts, or the expensive restaurants she frequents. She's calculated every move since the day she met you at Harvard. I have private investigators' reports that prove she researched our family's wealth before your first date." The words hit Sophia like physical blows. While it was true she had known about the Ashworth fortune, everyone in Boston did, she had fallen genuinely in love with Alexander's gentle nature and brilliant mind. Their courtship had been beautiful, filled with long walks along the Freedom Trail, intimate dinners in North End restaurants, and countless hours discussing literature and philosophy. "I won't let you destroy my son's future," Maximilian continued, his voice growing more menacing. "Tomorrow morning she leaves this house, forever. You'll divorce her quietly, and we'll provide a modest settlement to keep her silent about our family affairs. And if I refuse?" Alexander's question hung in the air like a blade. "Then you'll be cut off completely. No inheritance, no position in the company, no family support. You'll be as destitute as the day you were born." The silence that followed was devastating. Sophia waited, her heart pounding so hard she was certain it would wake the entire household. She waited for Alexander to defend their marriage, their love, their unborn child. She waited for the man she had pledged her life to stand up to his tyrannical father. The wait felt eternal. I need time to think," Alexander finally whispered. Those 5 words became the death knell of Sophia's dreams. The man she had trusted with her heart, her future, and her child's future, was considering abandoning them for money. Part 2. The Exile. The next morning arrived gray, and bitter, matching Sophia's devastated spirit. She had spent the night packing a small suitcase, her hands shaking as she folded the few personal belongings she could carry. The designer clothes and expensive jewelry Maximilian had mentioned so contemptuously were left behind. They had been gifts from Alexander, and now they felt like chains binding her to a family that had never truly accepted her. At precisely 7 o'clock, there was a sharp knock on the bedroom door. Alexander entered, but he couldn't meet her eyes. His face was pale, his usually immaculate appearance disheveled, as if he had been awake all night wrestling with his conscience. "Sophia, we need to talk," he began, his voice barely above a whisper. She turned to face him, her hand instinctively protecting her swollen belly. "I heard everything last night, Alexander. Every single word." His face crumpled. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under. My father—" "Your father what?" Sophia's voice was steady, despite the tears threatening to fall. "Your father is asking you to choose between money and your family, between luxury and love, between being a man and being a coward." Alexander flinched as if she had struck him. "It's not that simple. The family business, our responsibilities." "Our responsibilities." Sophia's voice rose, her carefully maintained composure finally cracking. "What about your responsibility to your wife, to your unborn child? What about the vows you made in that beautiful ceremony at Trinity Church, where you promised to forsake all others and stand by me through better or worse?" The room fell silent, except for the ticking of the antique clock on the mantelpiece, a wedding gift from Alexander's grandmother, one of the few family members who had genuinely welcomed Sophia. "I can't lose everything, Sophia. I was born into this family, this legacy. I don't know how to be anything else." Those words revealed the truth that Sophia had been too blind to see during their courtship. Alexander was not the independent, thoughtful man she had fallen in love with. He was a pampered prince who had never faced a real challenge, never had to choose between comfort and conscience. "Then you've already made your choice," she said quietly, picking up her suitcase. "I won't make this harder for you than it needs to be." As she walked toward the door, Alexander caught her arm. "Where will you go? How will you survive?" For the first time since this nightmare began, Sophia smiled, a cold, determined expression that would have made Maximilian proud. "I'll figure it out. I'm stronger than any of you ever gave me credit for." But as she descended the grand staircase of the Ashworth mansion for the last time, her bravado nearly crumbled. At the bottom of the stairs stood Maximilian, dressed impeccably in a 3-piece suit despite the early hour. His pale blue eyes, so similar to Alexander's, held no warmth, no compassion, no acknowledgement that she was carrying his grandchild. "Miss Whitmore," he said, deliberately using her maiden name, "I trust you understand the terms of your departure. Any attempt to contact this family, to claim financial support, or to involve the media will result in legal consequences you cannot afford to face." Sophia met his gaze without flinching. "I understand perfectly, Mr. Ashworth. But let me make something clear to you as well. Someday, when you're old and alone, when your money can't buy you the one thing you'll desperately need, forgiveness, remember this moment. Remember the pregnant woman you threw onto the streets in winter. Remember the grandchild you rejected. Because I promise you, that day will come." Maximilian's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Perhaps recognition that he was looking at a woman made of sterner stuff than he had realized. "Gregory will drive you wherever you wish to go within the city limits," he said coldly, referring to the family's longtime chauffeur. "That won't be necessary," Sophia replied, shouldering her suitcase. "I'd rather walk than spend another minute breathing the same air as this family." And with that, she stepped out into the December morning, 7 months pregnant and effectively homeless, but with her dignity intact. Part 3. The Struggle. The first year was the hardest thing Sophia had ever endured. She found a tiny apartment in Dorchester, a far cry from the mansion's luxury but clean and safe. The rent consumed most of her meager savings, and she quickly learned that being 7 months pregnant made finding employment nearly impossible. But Sophia possessed something that neither Maximilian nor Alexander had recognized: an unbreakable will and a brilliant mind for business. Before her marriage, she had completed her MBA at MIT with highest honors, specializing in financial analysis and investment strategies. The Ashworths had dismissed her education as irrelevant, assuming she would be content being a decorative wife and mother. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Her daughter, Emma Marie Whitmore, was born on February 14, 2005, at Boston Medical Center. As Sophia held her tiny daughter for the first time, she made a vow that would drive every decision for the next 20 years. Emma would never want for anything, never be made to feel less than worthy, and never have to depend on anyone but herself. Already subscribed? Leave a like and tell us where you're watching from. We want to know where our audience comes from. The first few months were a blur of sleepless nights, minimum wage jobs, and careful budgeting of every dollar. Sophia worked as a waitress at a diner in South Boston during Emma's nap times, while an elderly neighbor, Mrs. Kowalski, watched the baby for a modest fee. The work was exhausting, the tips were small, but Sophia saved every penny she could. During Emma's first year, while working nights and caring for her daughter during the days, Sophia began developing a business plan that would eventually make her fortune. She had noticed a gap in the market for affordable, high-quality childcare services for working mothers. Her own struggles had opened her eyes to the challenges faced by countless women trying to balance motherhood with career ambitions. Using her MIT education and the analytical skills that had earned her academic recognition, Sophia spent her rare free hours researching demographics, surveying potential customers, and developing financial projections. Her tiny apartment became a home office, with spreadsheets covering every available surface and business books borrowed from the public library stacked beside Emma's crib. By Emma's second birthday, Sophia had saved enough money to rent a small space in Jamaica Plain and had secured the necessary licenses to open her first childcare center. Little Stars Academy was modest, just room for 12 children, but it offered something revolutionary: flexible hours for working parents, educational programs designed by child development experts, and rates that working-class families could actually afford. The business model was brilliant in its simplicity. Instead of targeting wealthy families who could afford premium services, Sophia focused on the underserved market of middle and lower-income working parents. She kept costs down through efficient operations and innovative scheduling, allowing parents to drop off children during non-traditional hours to accommodate various work shifts. Within 6 months, Little Stars Academy had a waiting list. Within 2 years, Sophia opened her second location in Roxbury. By Emma's 5th birthday, she was operating 4 centers across Greater Boston and had begun franchising her model to other entrepreneurs. But success didn't come without sacrifice. There were countless nights when Sophia fell asleep at her desk, exhausted from 16-hour days. There were moments when the financial pressure felt crushing, when a major expense threatened to bankrupt her growing business. There were times when Emma asked why they couldn't live in a big house like other kids, not understanding that her mother was building something much more valuable than a mansion. She was building independence. Part 4. The Empire. The transformation was remarkable. By 2015, 10 years after being thrown from the Ashworth mansion, Sophia had built Little Stars Academy into a regional powerhouse. The company operated 47 locations across New England, employed over 800 people, and generated annual revenues exceeding $50 million. But Sophia's ambitions extended far beyond childcare. Using the profits from Little Stars Academy, she had begun investing in real estate, purchasing undervalued properties in up-and-coming neighborhoods throughout Boston. Her MIT education and natural business instincts served her well as she identified properties with development potential years before other investors recognized their value. The gentrification of South Boston, which she had predicted and invested in heavily, made her first fortune. As tech companies moved into the area and property values soared, Sophia's strategic investments multiplied exponentially. She reinvested the profits into more properties, more businesses, and began building a diversified portfolio that included restaurants, retail spaces, and residential developments. By 2020, 15 years after her exile, Sophia Whitmore was worth an estimated $200 million. Her name appeared regularly in Boston Business Journal as one of the city's most successful entrepreneurs. She had been featured on the cover of Forbes as an example of immigrant success, though she quietly chuckled at the irony, knowing that her immigrant story was actually one of domestic exile. Emma, now 15, was attending the prestigious Phillips Exeter Academy, the same prep school that had educated generations of Boston's elite families, including the Ashworths. She was a brilliant student, inheriting her mother's analytical mind and adding her own creative flair. Emma wanted to study architecture and urban planning, inspired by her mother's real estate developments and driven by a desire to create beautiful, functional spaces for families like theirs. The mansion Sophia now called home sat on 5 acres in Wellesley, one of Boston's most exclusive suburbs. The house itself was a stunning example of contemporary architecture, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of the surrounding landscape. It was featured in Architectural Digest as one of New England's most beautiful private residences. But for all her success, all her wealth, all her achievements, Sophia had never forgotten the cold December morning when she walked away from Marlborough Street with nothing but a suitcase and her unborn child. She had never forgotten Alexander's weakness, or Maximilian's cruelty. And she had certainly never forgotten her promise about the day when forgiveness would be the one thing money couldn't buy. That day was about to arrive. Part 5. The Return. The doorbell rang at precisely 3:17 p.m. on November 12, 2024. Sophia was in her home office, reviewing architectural plans for her latest development project, a mixed-use complex in Cambridge that would provide affordable housing alongside commercial space. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was now creating the kind of community she herself had once desperately needed. Her housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, knocked softly on the office door. "Mrs. Whitmore, there's a gentleman at the door asking to see you. He says his name is Maximilian Ashworth." The name hit Sophia like a physical blow. For a moment she couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't process the reality of what she had just heard. 20 years of careful emotional walls threatened to crumble in an instant. "Are you certain that's what he said?" Sophia asked, her voice carefully controlled. "Yes, ma'am. He appears to be quite elderly and unwell. Should I send him away?" Sophia stared out the window at the autumn landscape, her mind racing through possibilities. Why would Maximilian Ashworth appear at her door after 2 decades of silence? What could possibly bring the proud patriarch of Boston's banking elite to seek her out? "No, Mrs. Chen. Please show him to the living room. I'll be down in a few minutes." After the housekeeper left, Sophia stood before her bathroom mirror, studying her reflection. At 42, she was still beautiful, but the soft features of her youth had been refined by experience into something more formidable. Her blonde hair was now styled in an elegant bob. Her blue eyes held depths of knowledge that came only from surviving hardship, and her posture radiated the confidence of a woman who had built an empire from nothing. She chose her outfit carefully, a simple but exquisite black Chanel dress that had cost more than most people earned in a month, paired with the diamond earrings Emma had given her for her 40th birthday. She wanted to look successful, untouchable, and utterly indifferent to whatever had brought Maximilian Ashworth to her door. But when she descended the stairs and entered the living room, she was shocked by what she saw. The man sitting awkwardly on her Italian leather sofa bore little resemblance to the imposing figure who had expelled her from his home 20 years earlier. Maximilian Ashworth had aged dramatically, his once thick silver hair now thin and patchy, his formerly robust frame reduced to a frail shadow. His expensive suit hung loosely on his diminished frame, and his hands shook noticeably as he tried to maintain his composure. Most striking of all were his eyes. The cold, arrogant gaze that had once intimidated business rivals and family members alike had been replaced by something Sophia had never expected to see: desperation. "Maximilian," she said coolly, not offering him the courtesy of a more formal greeting. "This is unexpected." He struggled to stand, his movements labored and painful. "Sophia, I thank you for agreeing to see me. I haven't agreed to anything yet. I'm simply curious about what could possibly bring you to my home after 20 years of silence." The old man's composure cracked slightly. "I need to talk to you. Please, may I sit?" Sophia gestured to the chair across from where she had positioned herself, deliberately choosing the power position in the room. She waited in silence, allowing the uncomfortable pause to stretch until he was forced to speak. "I suppose you're wondering why I'm here," Maximilian began, his voice hoarse and uncertain. "The thought had crossed my mind," Sophia replied dryly. He took a shuddering breath. "I'm dying, Sophia. Pancreatic cancer. The doctors give me 3 months, maybe 4 if I'm lucky." Sophia felt a flicker of something, not quite sympathy, but perhaps the faintest recognition of shared mortality. She quickly suppressed it. "I'm sorry to hear that, but I fail to see what it has to do with me." Maximilian's hands clenched and unclenched in his lap. "Alexander, my son, he's..." The word seemed to stick in his throat. "Yes?" Sophia prompted, her tone neutral. "He's abandoned me. Completely. When the medical bills started mounting, when I could no longer manage the business affairs, when I became more burden than, asset, he had me moved to a care facility and cut off all contact. Just one click. Subscribe, leave a like, and say where you're watching from. Your support is essential for our growth." The revelation hit Sophia with unexpected force. Alexander, weak, malleable Alexander, had finally found his backbone, but only to abandon his dying father. The irony was almost too perfect. "The family fortune?" she asked. "Gone," Maximilian whispered. "Alexander liquidated everything. The business, the properties, the investments. He claimed it was to pay for my medical care, but..." He trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. "But you suspect he kept most of it for himself," Sophia completed. Maximilian nodded miserably. "I have nothing left. The facility, they've told me I have 2 weeks before they transfer me to a public nursing home. I've spent the last of my money getting here today." Sophia studied him for a long moment, trying to reconcile this broken man with the tyrant who had destroyed her life. "And you came here because I was wrong," he said, the words seemingly torn from his soul. "About everything. About you, about what mattered, about how I treated you, and..." His voice broke. "About my grandchild." The mention of Emma sent a surge of protective fury through Sophia. "Don't," she said sharply. "Don't you dare mention my daughter. Please, just listen to me," Maximilian begged, and the sight of this once powerful man begging was almost surreal. "I know I have no right to ask anything of you. I know what I did was unforgivable. But I've spent 20 years thinking about that morning, about the look in your eyes when you left. Have you?" Sophia's voice was ice cold. "How fascinating. Tell me, what exactly did you think about during those 20 years while I was building my life from nothing? While I was working 3 jobs to keep my daughter fed? While I was lying awake at night wondering if I was strong enough to give her the life she deserved?" Maximilian flinched with each word, but he continued. "I thought about how wrong I was, about how you weren't the gold digger I convinced myself you were, about how you were exactly what Alexander needed, someone strong, someone who could have made him a better man if I hadn't interfered." "If you hadn't interfered?" Sophia stood abruptly, her carefully maintained composure beginning to crack. "You didn't interfere, Maximilian. You destroyed. You took a young woman who loved your son, who was carrying your grandchild, and you threw her into the streets in winter like she was garbage." "I know," he whispered. "I know what I did." "Do you?" Sophia began pacing, 20 years of suppressed rage finally finding its voice. "Do you know that I gave birth to Emma in a charity ward because I couldn't afford private health care? Do you know that for the first 2 years of her life, I couldn't afford to heat our apartment properly, so I used to hold her all night to keep her warm? Do you know that she asked me until she was 8 years old why she didn't have a daddy like other children? Each revelation was like a physical blow to the old man. He doubled over slightly, as if in actual pain. "Do you know," Sophia continued relentlessly, "that when she was 10, she came home from school crying because some kid said she must be a bastard child since she didn't have a father? Do you know what it felt like to explain to my brilliant, beautiful daughter that her father chose? Money over family? Stop," Maximilian gasped. "Please stop." But Sophia was beyond mercy now. 20 years of pain, of struggle, of nights spent crying silently so Emma wouldn't hear. It all came pouring out. "Do you know that despite everything, despite your cruelty, despite Alexander's cowardice, despite being abandoned and rejected, I raised a daughter who is kinder, stronger, and more compassionate than any member of your family has ever been? She's graduating valedictorian from Exeter next year. She's been accepted early admission to Harvard, Stanford, and MIT. She wants to be an architect, to build homes for families, because she remembers what it felt like to be homeless." Maximilian was openly weeping now, his pride completely shattered. "I'm so sorry," he sobbed. "I'm so desperately sorry." Part 6. The Reckoning. Sophia stopped pacing and turned to face him fully. The sight of Maximilian Ashworth, once the terror of Boston's business community, reduced to a broken, weeping old man should have given her satisfaction. Instead, she felt an unexpected emptiness. "Sorry," she repeated quietly. "You're sorry. I know it doesn't change anything," he said through his tears. "I know it can't undo the damage I caused. But I needed you to know that I was wrong about everything. I was wrong about you, wrong about what makes a person valuable, wrong about what really matters in life." Sophia returned to her chair, studying him with clinical detachment. "What exactly do you want from me, Maximilian?" He lifted his head, and she saw that his eyes held a glimmer of the steel that had once made him formidable. "I want to see her, my granddaughter, just once before I die." "Absolutely not." Sophia's response was immediate and final. "Please, I'm begging you." "No." Sophia's voice cut through his plea like a blade. "You lost the right to call her your granddaughter 20 years ago when you threw us out of your house. Emma doesn't even know about you. And I intend to keep it that way." Maximilian's face crumpled. "I understand. I have no right to ask." "No, you don't." Sophia leaned forward slightly. "But I'm curious about something. You mentioned that Alexander abandoned you when you became inconvenient. How does it feel, Maximilian? How does it feel to be discarded by someone you trusted, someone you loved, someone you thought would stand by you?" The parallel wasn't lost on him. "It feels like dying," he whispered. "Yes," Sophia said with quiet. "Satisfaction. It does." They sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of 20 years of consequences settling between them like a thick fog. Finally, Maximilian spoke again. "I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that everything you've achieved, everything you've become, I'm proud of you. I know I have no right to feel pride about something I had no part in creating, but watching you from afar these past few years, seeing what you've built, you've been watching me." Sophia's voice sharpened dangerously. "Not stalking," he said quickly. "I hired a private investigator to keep tabs on you and Emma, just to make sure you were safe and well. I know it was wrong, but I needed to know that you had survived what I did to you. What you discovered instead," Sophia said slowly, "was that I hadn't just survived. I had thrived beyond your wildest imagination." "Yes," he admitted. "You built an empire that makes the old. Ashworth Holdings look modest by comparison. You became everything I thought I was. Successful, powerful, respected. But you did it with honor, with integrity, with compassion for people like yourself who needed opportunities." Sophia considered this for a long moment. "And now you want what from me? Money? A place in one of your precious nursing homes?" "No," Maximilian said, surprising her. "I want absolution. I want to die, knowing that I acknowledged my sins to the person I wronged most. Deeply, I want to die knowing that somewhere in this world, there's a woman who built something beautiful from the ashes of what I tried to destroy. Absolution, Sophia repeated thoughtfully. You want me to forgive you, so you can die with a clear conscience. I want to die knowing I faced the truth about myself. Sophia stood and walked to the window, gazing out at the grounds of her estate. The autumn sun was setting, casting long shadows across the perfectly manicured lawn. In a few hours, Emma would return from school, full of stories about her college preparations and her dreams for the future. Emma, who had never known want or fear or rejection, who had grown up surrounded by love and security and possibility. Do you know what I told Emma about her father? Sophia asked without turning around. No. I told her that he was a good man who loved her very much, but that sometimes adults make choices they think are right that turn out to be wrong. I told her that he would be proud of the woman she's becoming, and that someday, when she's older, I would tell her the whole truth and let her decide what she wanted to do with that information. Maximilian was quiet, perhaps recognizing the grace inherent in Sophia's choice to protect her daughter from the ugly truth of her conception and birth. I never told her about you at all, Sophia continued. In Emma's world, you simply don't exist. You never existed. And that, Maximilian, is your real punishment. Not poverty, not illness, not abandonment, but irrelevance, erasure. The knowledge that a woman you tried to destroy built a life so full and beautiful that there was no room in it for even the memory of your cruelty. The words hit him like physical blows, but he didn't protest. He seemed to understand that this was exactly what he deserved. Sophia turned back to face him. You want absolution? You want forgiveness? Here's what I'm going to give you instead. Indifference. I'm going to walk you to my door and you're going to leave my property, and I'm going to go back to my life. I'm not going to hate you anymore, because hate requires caring, and I simply don't care about you enough to sustain that emotion. She moved to the living room doorway, clearly indicating that the conversation was over. You are nothing to me, Maximilian Ashworth. You are less than nothing. You are a footnote in a story that has a much more beautiful ending than you could ever have imagined. Maximilian struggled to his feet, his movements even more labored than when he had arrived. As he made his way slowly toward the door, he paused beside her. For what it's worth, he said quietly, I think you're magnificent. I think you're everything I tried to teach Alexander to be, but failed completely to model myself. I think Emma is lucky to have you as a mother, and I think Alexander was the biggest fool in Boston history. Sophia didn't respond. She simply waited. And I think, Maximilian continued, his voice barely audible, that in another life, under different circumstances, I would have been proud to call you daughter. Epilogue. The legacy. As Sophia watched Maximilian's taxi disappear down her driveway, she felt something she hadn't expected. Peace. Not the satisfaction of revenge, not the joy of vindication, but a deep, profound peace that came from realizing that the angry, hurt young woman who had walked away from Marlborough Street 20 years ago had finally, completely, been laid to rest. Emma arrived home an hour later, bursting through the door with her usual energy and enthusiasm. Mom, you'll never guess what happened at school today, she called out, dropping her backpack in the foyer and heading straight for the kitchen where she knew her mother would be preparing dinner. Sophia looked up from where she was chopping vegetables, taking in the sight of her daughter. Tall, confident, beautiful, and utterly unaware of the drama that had played out in her home that afternoon. Emma had Alexander's blonde hair and blue eyes, but her spirit, her strength, her moral compass, that was all Sophia's doing. Tell me everything, Sophia said, just as she had every day for the past 15 years. As Emma launched into an animated account of her day, her college preparations, and her dreams for the future, Sophia found herself thinking about legacy. Not the kind built from money or property or business empires, though she had certainly built those too. The real legacy was sitting across from her, gesturing enthusiastically as she talked about her plans to design sustainable housing for low-income families. Emma would graduate from Exeter in 6 months and head to Harvard in the fall. She would study architecture and urban planning, just as she had always dreamed. She would build beautiful, functional spaces for families who needed them. She would make the world a little better, a little kinder, a little more just. And she would do it all without ever knowing that her grandfather had once thrown her mother onto the streets in winter, without ever knowing that she was born into rejection and raised in struggle. She would do it because she had been raised to believe that strength was meant to protect the vulnerable, that success carried the responsibility to lift others up, and that love, real love, was the most powerful force in the universe. Later that evening, after Emma had gone upstairs to work on her college essays, Sophia's phone rang. The caller ID showed a number she didn't recognize. "Sophia Whitmore," she answered. "Mrs. Whitmore? This is Dr. Patricia Hawkins from Mass General. I'm calling about Maximilian Ashworth. He listed you as his emergency contact." Sophia's grip tightened on the phone. "I'm sorry, but there must be some mistake. I haven't had any contact with Mr. Ashworth in 20 years. I understand this might be surprising, but he was quite insistent. He collapsed about an hour ago at the Back Bay train station. We've brought him to the hospital, but his condition is very serious. He's asking for you." Sophia closed her eyes, feeling the weight of one final decision settling on her shoulders. She could simply hang up, let Maximilian face his end alone as he had left her to face her beginning. She could maintain her position of indifference, her stance that he simply didn't matter enough to merit her attention. Or she could choose to be the woman she had raised her daughter to become, someone who extended compassion even to those who didn't deserve it, who chose grace over vengeance, who understood that mercy was not about the recipient, but about the giver. "I'll be there in 30 minutes, she heard herself saying. When she arrived at the hospital, she found Maximilian in the ICU, barely conscious and surrounded by machines that were keeping him alive. A young doctor explained that he had suffered massive organ failure and had perhaps hours left to live. Sophia sat beside his bed. In the sterile white room, watching the rise and fall of his chest, listening to the steady beep of the monitors, this man who had once seemed so powerful, so threatening, so capable of destroying lives, now looked like what he had always truly been, just another fragile human being, facing the ultimate equalizer that came for rich and poor alike. His eyes fluttered open, and when they focused on her face, they filled with tears. "You came," he whispered. "I came," she confirmed. "Why?" Sophia considered the question for a long moment. "Because 20 years ago, I promised myself that I would never let cruelty change who I was at my core. Because I don't want to become the kind of person who leaves someone to die alone, even someone who deserves it. And because..." She paused, surprised by her own words. "Because I want my daughter to live in a world where compassion is stronger than vengeance." Maximilian's hand moved slightly on the hospital blanket, and after a moment's hesitation, Sophia took it in hers. His skin was cold, papery, utterly frail. "Tell me about her," he whispered. "Tell me about Emma." And so, in the last hours of Maximilian Ashworth's life, Sophia told him about the granddaughter he would never meet. She told him about Emma's first steps, her first words, her first day of school. She told him about piano recitals and science fairs, and the essay contest Emma had won with a piece about creating affordable housing for working families. She told him about the young woman who wanted to build homes, because she remembered what it felt like to need one. As the sun rose over Boston, Maximilian Ashworth died peacefully, holding the hand of the woman he had wronged more deeply than anyone else in his life, listening to stories about the granddaughter who would carry forward a legacy of kindness that he had tried and failed to destroy. When Sophia finally returned home that morning, she found Emma in the kitchen making breakfast, humming as she moved around. The familiar space. "Good morning, Mom," Emma said cheerfully. "You're up early." "Good morning, sweetheart," Sophia replied, pulling her daughter into a hug that lasted perhaps a moment longer than usual. "Everything okay?" Emma asked, studying her mother's face with the perceptiveness that had always marked her as extraordinary. "Everything's perfect," Sophia said, and meant it completely. Absolutely perfect. 3 months later, Sophia received a call from an attorney informing her that Maximilian Ashworth had left her a letter in his will. When she opened it, she found a single sheet of paper with a message written in shaking handwriting. Sophia, you were right about everything. You were right about what mattered, right about what made someone valuable, right about what real strength looked like. Emma is your greatest achievement, but you are mine. In trying to destroy you, I created something magnificent. I know I have no right to feel pride in what you became, but I do. Thank you for showing me what grace looks like in the final moments of my life. Your daughter will change the world, because you changed her world every single day. M.A. Sophia read the letter twice, then folded it carefully and placed it in her desk drawer. She would keep it, not as a reminder of past pain, but as a testament to the power of choice. The choice to build rather than destroy, to lift up rather than tear down, to love rather than hate. That evening, as she and Emma sat together, planning the details of Emma's graduation party, Sophia reflected on the strange circle that had finally closed. 20 years ago, she had walked away from the Ashworth mansion with nothing but determination and love. Now, she had built something far more valuable than any fortune. A life lived with purpose, a daughter raised with wisdom, and a legacy of compassion that would outlast any business empire. The doorbell rang again, but this time it was just the florist delivering arrangements for Emma's party. There would be no more ghosts from the past, no more reckonings to face. The future stretched ahead, bright with possibility, built on the unshakable foundation of a mother's love and a daughter's dreams. As Sophia looked across the table at Emma, who was sketching ideas for sustainable housing developments in the margins of her homework, she finally understood what true victory looked like. It wasn't about money or status or revenge. It was about this: a kitchen filled with laughter, a daughter who dreamed of making the world better, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing that love, in the end, had conquered all.